The night sky over the planet Vorix shimmered with the auroras of its twin moons, casting an ethereal glow across the sprawling metropolis of Ricelock. Amid the towering structures of the giants, Eloa sprinted through the shadows, her small figure barely noticeable against the monolithic landscape. At only 1.6 meters tall, she was a defect in the eyes of her people, an anomaly in a world where the average height exceeded 10 meters. Her violet skin and silver hair marked her as a native, but her size rendered her an outcast. Eloa's heart pounded as the shouts of the patrol guards echoed behind her. The metallic clang of their boots reverberated against the massive steel walkways, each step a reminder of the stark contrast between her diminutive stature and the towering giants of her world. She darted into an alley, her small frame slipping into a maintenance duct designed for drones. Here, her size worked to her advantage, allowing her to evade the guards who were too large to follow. The duct led her to the outskirts of the city, where the towering buildings gave way to industrial zones. Eloa paused to catch her breath, her lungs burning from the exertion. She adjusted the medallion around her neck, a gift from her late mother, and her only tangible connection to the woman who had disappeared when she was a child. The medallion felt warm against her chest, a small comfort in the cold, harsh world she had grown up in. Ahead stood her father's laboratory, a peculiar structure cobbled together from materials scavenged over decades. Unlike the sleek, uniform architecture of Ricelock, this building was a patchwork of different designs, reflecting her father's eccentric and defiant nature. He was a brilliant scientist, but his insistence on protecting Eloa had made him a pariah among his peers. Eloa hesitated at the door, noticing the security field was offline. A chill ran down her spine. The laboratory was always heavily protected. She slipped inside, her bare feet silent against the cold, polished floor. The main hall was dark, but faint voices drifted from the research chamber. She crept closer, her small frame pressed against the wall as she peered through a gap in the doorway. Inside, her father stood defiant, facing 3 members of the council. The towering giants loomed over him, their ornate robes a stark contrast to his simple, practical attire. The lead council member's voice was cold and authoritative as he berated her father. "You have defied every directive, Professor Talek. Harboring a defect is a crime, and you will face the consequences." "She is not a defect," her father replied, his voice steady despite the tension in his stance. "She is my daughter. And her unique traits are proof of genetic potential, not failure." The council member sneered. "Your delusions have blinded you. Tomorrow, the defect will be taken to processing. If you resist, we will dismantle this lab and strip you of your status." Eloa's heart sank. Processing was a euphemism for extermination. No one ever returned from it. Her father's shoulders stiffened as the council members turned to leave. Once the room was silent, Eloa stepped into the light, her voice trembling. "Father, I won't let them take me." Her father's face softened as he knelt to her level. "Eloa, you are brilliant, courageous, and so much more than they will ever understand. But I cannot protect you here. There's no time to argue." He guided her to a concealed chamber she had never seen before. In its center was a circular platform surrounded by energy fields that crackled with a faint blue light. Eloa stared at the device, her mind racing. "What is this?" "An interdimensional transport," he explained, his fingers flying over a control panel. "Your mother and I built it together, years ago. It's why the council wanted her gone. She found a way to reach Earth, a world where you will be safe. You must go now." Eloa's breath caught. "Earth? That's just a myth." Her father placed a small data crystal in her hand. "It's real. Everything you need to know is in this. Trust me." The sound of breaking glass shattered the moment. The council guards had returned, their heavy boots thundering through the laboratory. Her father's expression hardened. "Go, Eloa. Now." The platform began to hum as energy fields flared to life. Eloa stepped onto it, clutching the medallion and data crystal tightly. Her father placed a hand on her shoulder, his violet eyes filled with sorrow and pride. "You are not a defect, my daughter. You are a miracle." The guards burst into the room, weapons raised, but it was too late. The platform's energy surged, and in a blinding flash of light, Eloa disappeared. The world around Eloa dissolved into an endless cascade of light and sensation, pulling her in every direction at once. Her screams were silent, consumed by the roaring energy surrounding her. The medallion on her chest burned hot, then turned ice-cold, its power merging with the swirling forces of the transport. Just as she felt she might be torn apart, everything stopped. The light faded, replaced by a cool breeze brushing against her skin. She landed hard on something soft and damp, the impact knocking the air from her lungs. Eloa gasped, her vision blurry as her body adjusted to the sudden stillness. The scent of earth and grass filled her nostrils, a stark contrast to the metallic tang of ricelock. As her vision cleared, she found herself under a dark sky sprinkled with unfamiliar stars. The world was eerily quiet, save for the rustle of leaves in the wind. She pushed herself upright, her limbs shaky and weak. Around her stretched a park-like area, dotted with trees and surrounded by strange, smooth paths. The air felt thinner but not suffocating, cooler yet strangely refreshing. Nearby, she could see structures that towered above the landscape, but unlike the impossibly colossal buildings of her home, these were scaled for beings her size. Her breath caught as realization hit, she was on Earth. The medallion pulsed faintly against her chest, as if affirming the impossible. For a moment, relief and wonder washed over her. The transport had worked. Her father's research, his years of defiance, had not been in vain. But that relief quickly gave way to the sharp sting of loss. He was still back on Ricelock, standing against the council to buy her time. Tears welled in her eyes, but she blinked them away, knowing she couldn't afford to break down. She had to survive, for his sake as much as hers. The sudden wailing of a siren jolted her back to the present. A vehicle approached on a nearby road, its flashing lights sweeping across the park. A voice echoed through the air, amplified by some unseen device. "Park closes at midnight. Clear the area immediately." Panic surged through her. She had no idea what laws governed this world or how its people would react to her violet skin and silver hair. Her first encounter needed to be on her terms, not theirs. Eloa scrambled to her feet, her legs wobbling as she ducked behind a tree. She stayed low, moving from shadow to shadow, until the lights passed and the vehicle disappeared into the distance. Emerging cautiously, she found herself on a paved street lined with glowing signs and bustling with activity, even in the late hours. People walked in groups, chatting and laughing in languages she didn't understand. Her presence drew stares, some curious, others wary. The realization that she stood out so blatantly made her stomach twist. Her skin, her hair, everything about her was alien here. A large video screen mounted on a nearby building caught her attention. Vibrant images of people and landscapes flashed across its surface, accompanied by scrolling text. She recognized one word among the unfamiliar script, Tokyo. The name resonated from her father's lessons. It was a major city on Earth, a hub of technology and culture. At least she had some idea of where she was. Her thoughts were interrupted by a commotion behind her. She turned to see a group of young men pointing in her direction, their faces alight with excitement. One of them raised a small device, aiming it at her like a weapon. She froze, unsure of their intentions, until she heard their chatter. Though the words were foreign, the tone wasn't hostile. One word repeated often enough for her to catch, cosplay. The realization dawned slowly. They didn't think she was real. They thought she was part of some elaborate costume or performance. It gave her an opportunity to blend in, if only she could avoid further attention. But the device one man held, now glowing faintly, seemed to be capturing her image. Her pulse quickened. She needed to get out of sight before curiosity turned into something more invasive. Eloa ducked into an alleyway, weaving through the narrow paths until she reached a quieter area. Her legs trembled, exhaustion creeping into her every movement. She had nothing, no money, no supplies, and no understanding of how this world functioned. The medallion and the data crystal her father had given her were her only lifelines. The faint hum of machinery drew her attention. Following the sound, she found herself in front of a workshop. Through the windows, she could see complex tools and glowing monitors, reminiscent of her father's lab. A young man was working inside, his focus fixed on a device that emitted sparks as he tinkered. Something about his meticulous movements reminded her of her father. Desperation outweighed caution. Eloa knocked softly on the door. The man looked up, startled, his dark eyes locking onto her through the glass. He hesitated, then approached and opened the door, his expression a mix of confusion and curiosity. "Can I help you?" he asked, his accent strange but his words clear enough. Eloa clutched the data crystal tightly, her voice steady despite her exhaustion. "I need your help. Please." The man studied her, his gaze lingering on her violet skin and silver hair. "Nice cosplay," he said, stepping aside to let her in. "Though I have to say, it's the most convincing I've ever seen." "It's not cosplay," she replied quietly, stepping into the workshop. "And I'm not from here." The man raised an eyebrow, clearly intrigued. "Not from here? As in, not from Earth?" Eloa nodded, holding up the data crystal. "I escaped from a world of giants. My father's research can prove it. But I need equipment to access this." For a moment, the man stared at her, his skepticism warring with his curiosity. Then, with a shrug, he gestured to his workbench. "All right. Let's see what we've got." Relief flooded through her as she followed him deeper into the workshop. For the first time since landing on Earth, Eloa felt a glimmer of hope. Maybe, just maybe, she had found an ally. The workshop hummed with life, its walls lined with shelves crammed full of tools, components, and strange devices. The young man, who introduced himself as Andy Tanaka, set the data crystal on his workbench and examined it closely. His curiosity seemed to override any doubt about Eloa's story. "You're serious, aren't you?" he asked, glancing up at her. "Yes," Eloa replied, her voice firm despite her fatigue. "My father was a scientist on my world, and this crystal contains his research. It's vital, not just to me but possibly to your world as well." Andy raised an eyebrow but said nothing, turning back to the crystal. He connected it to a sleek machine on his desk, which whirred softly as its screen came to life. The strange symbols and codes that appeared meant little to Eloa, but Andy's face lit up. "This is incredible," he muttered, his fingers dancing over the keyboard. "The encoding is advanced, like nothing I've ever seen. This isn't just data, it's a treasure trove of knowledge." Eloa felt a flicker of relief but also unease. "Can you access it?" "Maybe," Andy replied, frowning slightly as he worked. "The encryption is complicated, but I've seen patterns like this before in theoretical models. It's almost like it's not just protecting the data, it's communicating with something." Her heart skipped a beat. "Communicating? With what?" "I'm not sure yet." He leaned back, running a hand through his disheveled hair. "But if this is real, if what you're saying about your world is true, then this crystal could be revolutionary. It could change everything." Eloa nodded, though she didn't share his excitement. For her, the crystal was a lifeline, a connection to her father and a key to surviving on Earth. But she didn't have the luxury of celebrating discoveries right now. "We need to decode it quickly," she said, her voice urgent. "The council on my world will stop at nothing to retrieve me. If they find a way to follow me here." Andy looked up sharply. "Wait. They can follow you?" "I don't know," she admitted. The transport my father used was experimental, but they're powerful. If they figure out how it works, they'll come. Andy frowned, clearly unsettled. Well, that's not great. But if they come here, I'm guessing they'll stick out a lot more than you do. Eloa didn't respond, her mind racing with worst-case scenarios. The council wouldn't just let her go. If they came to Earth, it wouldn't be for negotiation, it would be for control. Andy's voice broke into her thoughts. Let's focus on this crystal for now. If it has anything we can use to protect you, we need to find it. Hours passed as Andy worked, the two of them huddled in the workshop. He explained parts of the process to Eloa, though much of it was lost on her. She watched him with a mix of awe and gratitude, recognizing the same spark of determination in him that had driven her father. Despite the exhaustion evident in his eyes, Andy didn't stop, driven by a combination of scientific curiosity and a growing sense of responsibility. At some point, he paused to ask her about her world. Eloa hesitated, the memories still raw, but she decided he deserved the truth. She described Ricelock, the towering metropolis of giants, and the suffocating life she'd led there as a defect. She told him about her father's defiance, his determination to prove her worth, and the sacrifices he'd made to send her to safety. Andy listened intently, his expression shifting between fascination and outrage. They exiled you because of your size? He asked incredulously. That's insane. On Earth, intelligence and determination are what matter. Not height. Eloa smiled faintly, though it didn't reach her eyes. It's not so different here, she said. People stared at me on the street. They whispered. I'm still an outsider. Andy opened his mouth to argue but closed it again, seeming to realize she wasn't wrong. Instead, he offered a small smile. Well, you're not an outsider here. At least, not in this workshop. The words warmed her, though she knew it wasn't enough. Being accepted by one person wouldn't protect her from the dangers she faced. Still, it was a start, a small island of safety in a vast, unfamiliar world. As dawn began to break outside, Andy leaned back in his chair with a triumphant grin. Got it, he announced, gesturing to the screen. The crystal's data is partially decoded. It's not everything, but there's a lot here, schematics, theories, and something that looks like coordinates. Eloa's heart raced. Coordinates? To what? I don't know yet, Andy admitted, scrolling through the data. But it's marked as a critical location. Maybe your father knew you'd need to go there. Her mind swirled with possibilities. Could it be a safe haven? Another portal? Or something else entirely? Whatever it was, she knew it held the answers she needed. Can you map it? She asked. Already working on it, Andy said, typing furiously. But it's going to take time. This is complex. Eloa nodded, though her anxiety was mounting. Time wasn't a luxury she had. If the council was pursuing her, every second counted. But for now, she had to trust Andy's expertise. He was her only ally, and perhaps the only person on Earth who could help her survive. As Andy continued his work, Eloa leaned against the wall, clutching her medallion tightly. She closed her eyes, sending a silent prayer to her father, hoping he was still alive, still fighting. She didn't know what awaited her at the coordinates, but one thing was clear, her journey on Earth was just beginning. The hum of machinery filled the small workshop as Andy worked tirelessly to decipher the remaining data. Eloa paced the room, her mind restless. She glanced occasionally at the screen, watching streams of alien symbols and Earth-based code intertwine. The coordinates her father had marked as critical were still a mystery, but she felt a growing urgency to understand their significance. Andy finally broke the silence. These coordinates don't align with any earthly landmarks, he said, squinting at the map displayed on his screen. But they're precise, down to the millimeter. Whatever this location is, your father knew exactly where he wanted you to go. Eloa moved closer, peering at the map. It's over water, she observed, pointing to a large expanse of blue. What's there? Andy tapped his keyboard, pulling up a satellite image. The coordinates hovered over an isolated area in the Pacific Ocean. Nothing, he said, frowning. No islands, no structures. Just open water. That can't be right, Eloa murmured, her fingers brushing the medallion at her neck. Her father wouldn't have sent her there without a reason. Could it be, hidden? Maybe there's something beneath the surface. Andy considered her suggestion, his curiosity clearly piqued. Possible. Submarine bases, underwater labs, they're not unheard of. But how would we get there? Eloa felt a pang of frustration. She had escaped one impossible situation only to land in another. There has to be a way, she said, determination hardening her voice. Can you get us closer? Maybe there's equipment we can use to explore the area. Andy leaned back in his chair, thinking. I know someone who might help, he said finally. He's a marine researcher with access to submersibles. If anyone can take us to a hidden location in the middle of the ocean, it's him. Eloa's chest tightened at the thought of involving more people. Will he ask questions? Andy grinned. Oh, definitely. But he's a good guy. And trust me, he's seen weirder things than you. The statement did little to ease her anxiety, but she nodded. What choice did she have? Every step forward was a gamble, but staying put wasn't an option. When can we leave? Tonight, Andy replied. I'll make some calls. But you'll need to stay out of sight until then. That video of you running through the park is still making the rounds. Eloa groaned softly. She had almost forgotten about the viral footage. How bad is it? Andy pulled up the video, and her stomach sank. The clip had millions of views, with comment sections filled with debates about her authenticity. Some called her a hoax, while others theorized she was an alien or a government experiment. The attention made her feel exposed, vulnerable. It's mostly conspiracy theorists, Andy said, trying to reassure her. No one serious is taking it as real. But we should be careful. The wrong kind of attention could complicate things. As the day wore on, Andy prepared supplies for their journey while Eloa stayed in the workshop's back room, avoiding the windows. She felt restless, the weight of her father's sacrifice pressing heavily on her shoulders. The medallion around her neck seemed to pulse faintly, a subtle warmth that reminded her she wasn't entirely alone. When night fell, Andy packed the last of their equipment into a small, beat-up van parked outside. Ready? He asked, handing her a hooded jacket to conceal her distinctive features. Eloa pulled the hood over her silver hair and nodded. Let's go. The drive through the city was tense. Eloa kept her head down, her heart pounding every time they passed a police car or groups of people lingering on the streets. Andy, sensing her unease, kept the conversation light, pointing out landmarks and sharing snippets of Earth culture. It was a small comfort, though her mind remained focused on the mission ahead. They arrived at a sprawling harbor on the city's outskirts, where Andy's contact, Dr. Marcus Haynes, was waiting. A rugged man in his 50s, Marcus had the weathered look of someone who had spent most of his life at sea. His sharp eyes swept over Eloa as Andy introduced her, but he didn't comment on her unusual appearance. So, you need a ride to the middle of nowhere, Marcus said, his tone skeptical but intrigued. What's out there? Research, Andy replied smoothly, avoiding specifics. It's important. And we're on a tight schedule. Marcus crossed his arms, studying them for a long moment. Then he shrugged. Fine. But if this is some kind of prank, you're paying for the fuel. They boarded a research vessel equipped with advanced sonar and submersibles. As the boat cut through the dark waters, Eloa stood at the railing, staring at the ocean. The vastness of it was overwhelming, unlike anything she had ever seen on Ricelock. The cool breeze carried the scent of salt and freedom, but it did little to ease her nerves. Marcus joined her, leaning against the railing. "You're not from around here, are you?" he asked, his voice casual but probing. Eloa hesitated, unsure of how much to reveal. "I've had a difficult journey," she said carefully. "I'm just trying to find a place where I belong." Marcus gave her a sidelong glance but didn't press further. "Well, wherever you're headed, I hope you find it." By dawn, they reached the coordinates. The sonar revealed nothing unusual at first, just endless depths of water. But as Marcus adjusted the settings, a faint signal appeared, deep beneath the surface. "That's not natural," he muttered, his brow furrowing. "What is it?" Eloa asked, her pulse quickening. "Something solid," Marcus replied. "We'll need to take the submersible down to get a better look." Eloa and Andy exchanged a glance. This was it, the moment they had been working toward. As the submersible was prepared, Eloa couldn't shake the feeling that whatever lay beneath the waves would change everything. Her father's final gift had brought her here, and now, she was on the brink of uncovering a secret that could hold the key to her survival, and perhaps much more. The submersible hummed softly as it was lowered into the water, the ocean's surface swallowing it whole. Inside the cramped cabin, Eloa sat across from Andy, her hands gripping the safety harness as they descended. The glow of the control panels illuminated their faces, casting flickering shadows in the small space. Marcus piloted the vessel, his focus unwavering as he guided it toward the faint signal the sonar had picked up. The further they went, the darker the ocean became. The sunlight that had briefly pierced the water was long gone, replaced by the eerie glow of the submersible's exterior lights. The pressure outside increased with every meter, and Eloa's heart raced in tandem. This was a world entirely alien to her, even more so than the streets of Tokyo. Andy broke the silence, his voice hushed as though he feared disturbing the deep. "If your father's data is accurate, we're looking for something advanced. Probably concealed. Whatever's down here might not even register as a structure by Earth standards." Eloa nodded, though her throat felt dry. Her father's work had always bordered on the impossible. If he believed something vital lay here, then she had to trust him. Still, the unknown gnawed at her, a mixture of fear and anticipation churning in her stomach. Marcus glanced back, his voice steady. "We're approaching the signal. Keep your eyes peeled. Sometimes it's easier to spot anomalies visually than relying on instruments." The submersible's lights cut through the murky water, revealing an otherworldly landscape of rocky formations and sediment. The sonar's ping grew stronger, and then suddenly, something massive loomed ahead, its outline barely visible in the dark. Marcus slowed the vessel, maneuvering closer until the lights illuminated a structure that defied belief. It was a dome-like construct, impossibly smooth and glinting faintly under the submersible's beams. The material was unlike anything Eloa had ever seen, even in her father's lab, a blend of organic curves and metallic sharpness. Strange glyphs, eerily similar to the symbols on the data crystal, adorned the surface, pulsating faintly as though alive. Andy's breath hitched. "That's not from Earth," he whispered, awe creeping into his voice. "It's older than anything we've built, maybe older than humanity itself." Eloa leaned forward, her medallion warming against her chest. "It's not just old. It's connected to my world. My father must have known this was here." Marcus whistled low, his voice tinged with disbelief. "Whatever it is, it's been sitting here a long time. Doesn't look damaged, though. It might still be functional." "Functional?" Andy echoed, his excitement barely contained. "If it's active, it could be some kind of gateway or power source. We need to get closer." Marcus hesitated but relented, steering the submersible toward an opening that appeared as they circled the structure. It was a gaping entrance, large enough to accommodate the small vessel. The glyphs on the outer shell glowed brighter as they approached, pulsing in rhythm with Eloa's medallion. Eloa clutched the medallion tightly, a deep sense of familiarity washing over her. "It's reacting," she murmured. "To me, or maybe to the crystal. This place knows I'm here." Marcus raised an eyebrow but said nothing, focusing instead on guiding the submersible through the entrance. Inside, the lights revealed a vast chamber, its walls lined with more of the pulsating glyphs. Strange, plant-like structures grew along the edges, glowing faintly in shades of blue and green. The airlock system seemed intact, suggesting the structure wasn't entirely submerged. Andy was nearly vibrating with excitement. "This is incredible. It's like a hybrid of technology and biology, something that evolved and was built simultaneously. If your father knew about this, he must have been working on more than just transport tech." Eloa didn't respond, her attention drawn to a central console that emerged as they moved deeper into the chamber. It resembled a pedestal, its surface shimmering with a liquid-like sheen. The medallion around her neck grew hot, and she instinctively unfastened it, holding it in her palm. "It wants me to do something," she said, her voice barely above a whisper. Marcus brought the submersible to a stop, his expression a mix of caution and curiosity. "Whatever it is, just, don't trigger an explosion, okay?" Eloa ignored the comment, unbuckling her harness and stepping toward the console. The submersible's cabin was airtight, but the chamber outside appeared to have breathable air. A faint shimmering barrier at the entrance seemed to be holding back the water. Without hesitation, Eloa placed the medallion against the console's surface. The effect was immediate. The glyphs lining the walls flared to life, their glow intensifying until the entire chamber was bathed in light. The console began to shift, its surface rippling like liquid as it formed intricate patterns. A low hum resonated through the structure, followed by a voice, soft, melodic, and entirely alien. "Welcome, descendant of Voria. The path is open." Eloa staggered back, her heart pounding. It's speaking," she stammered, the words echoing in her mind more than her ears. Andy stared in disbelief. "Did it just call you a descendant? What does that mean?" "I don't know," Eloa admitted, her voice trembling. "But my mother's name was Voria. She disappeared years ago. My father always said she was searching for something." Marcus's expression darkened. "If this thing is alive, or sentient, we're way out of our depth. You sure you want to keep going?" Eloa steadied herself, her determination overriding her fear. "I have to. My father sacrificed everything to get me here. Whatever this place is, it's connected to me, and to him. I need to find out why." Before anyone could respond, the console emitted a beam of light, scanning Eloa from head to toe. The medallion glowed brighter, and the voice returned, softer this time. "Coordinates confirmed. Awaiting activation." Andy's eyes widened. "Activation for what?" Eloa's grip on the medallion tightened as she looked toward the console. Her father had prepared her for this, even if she hadn't realized it at the time. This was no longer just about her survival, it was about uncovering a truth that could reshape her understanding of her world, and perhaps even Earth's. With a deep breath, she stepped forward. "Let's find out." The chamber pulsed with energy as Eloa placed her hands on the shimmering console. The surface felt alive, its texture shifting under her fingers like liquid silk. The glyphs around her glowed brighter, and the low hum of the structure intensified, reverberating through her chest. She glanced back at Andy and Marcus, who were watching her with a mixture of awe and apprehension. The voice spoke again, calm and melodic. "Activation sequence initiated. Prepare for dimensional recalibration." Eloa swallowed hard, unsure of what that meant. "Dimensional recalibration?" she asked aloud, her voice trembling slightly. Andy leaned closer, still inside the submersible. "Sounds like it's aligning something, maybe another transport system like the one your father used. If this place is connected to your world, it might be a gateway." Marcus frowned, gripping the controls of the submersible. "Or a weapon." We have no idea what this thing is capable of. Eloa didn't waver. My father wouldn't have sent me here if it was dangerous, at least not to us. This is part of his plan. I have to trust him. The console responded to her touch, emitting a series of holographic displays that filled the air around her. The symbols and patterns were complex, shifting too quickly for her to comprehend. But the medallion pulsed warmly against her chest, and instinctively, she placed it into a small depression that had formed on the console's surface. The effect was immediate. A beam of light shot upward from the console, connecting to the apex of the dome. The glyphs lining the walls began to move, rearranging themselves into intricate sequences that seemed to flow like water. The voice returned, this time in a language Eloa couldn't understand, but the tone carried a sense of urgency. Andy's fingers flew across his tablet as he tried to decode the glyphs. It's doing something big. The energy levels in this structure are off the charts, it's like it's waking up. Eloa felt the hum in the chamber shift into a low vibration that made the air feel electric. Her vision blurred for a moment as a wave of light rippled outward from the console, passing through her and the submersible. When her vision cleared, the holographic displays had converged into a single image, a massive star map, dotted with glowing points of light. One point pulsed brightly, drawing her attention. It was far from Earth, nestled within a dense cluster of stars. The medallion glowed in response, and Eloa's breath caught. "That's my world," she whispered, her voice barely audible. Andy looked up, his face pale. "Eloa, this isn't just a gateway. It's a network. These points, they're interconnected systems, like a web spanning dimensions. If your world is part of this, then, so is Earth." Marcus's jaw tightened. "You're saying this thing links planets, maybe even civilizations?" Andy nodded, his excitement tempered by the gravity of the discovery. "And not just planets. Dimensions, too. This is advanced beyond anything we've ever imagined. It's like finding the blueprint for an interdimensional highway." Eloa's thoughts raced. The Council on Ricelock had always sought control, domination through technology and power. If they discovered this place, they wouldn't hesitate to use it for conquest. Her father had hidden the coordinates for a reason, this wasn't just a refuge for her. It was a safeguard for Earth and countless other worlds. The voice interrupted her thoughts, speaking once more in its melodic tone. "Energy reserves insufficient for full activation. Additional power source required." Eloa's brow furrowed. "Power source? What does it need?" Andy studied the holographic display. "It looks like the system is designed to draw energy from organic sources. Living beings. Maybe it's biosynchronized with you." Eloa felt a chill. "You mean it needs me?" Marcus frowned. "If that's true, then this thing isn't just a gateway. It's keyed to you specifically. Your father must have known you'd be the only one who could activate it." Before she could respond, the chamber shook violently, sending a ripple through the submersible. Marcus grabbed the controls to stabilize it. "What was that?" The voice shifted, its tone sharp and insistent. "Dimensional breach detected. External interference imminent." Andy's eyes widened. "Breach? That means—" "They've found me," Eloa said, her voice breaking. Her worst fear had come true. The Council had managed to track her through the transport. They were coming, and this time, they wouldn't stop until they had her, or destroyed everything. The holographic display flickered, revealing a distorted image of the ocean outside the structure. Through the interference, shapes began to appear, massive, shadowy forms descending rapidly through the water. Eloa's stomach dropped. "It's them," she whispered. "The Council." Marcus's face hardened. "If they've got the kind of tech you're describing, we're out of our league here." Eloa's hands tightened into fists. She couldn't let them take this place. The network was too important, too dangerous in the wrong hands. Her father had sacrificed everything to give her a chance to protect it. Now, it was up to her. She turned to Andy and Marcus, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. We have to activate it. Fully. If I'm the key, then I'll do whatever it takes. Andy hesitated, his face conflicted. Eloa, we don't know what will happen if you do this. It could work, or it could destroy everything. If the council takes control, it's over anyway, she said firmly. This is the only way. Marcus nodded grimly. Then let's make it count. Eloa stepped back to the console, placing her hands on its surface once more. The medallion pulsed brighter than ever, its light merging with the glyphs as the chamber roared to life. The hum turned into a deafening vibration, the structure itself seeming to resonate with her energy. She closed her eyes, focusing on the warmth of the medallion and the memory of her father's voice. The glyphs responded, their glow intensifying until the entire chamber was blinding. The last thing Eloa heard before everything disappeared was the voice, calm and resolute. Dimensional recalibration initiated. Prepare for ascension. The blinding light engulfed the chamber, swallowing Eloa in a cascade of energy that felt both overwhelming and familiar. The hum grew into a deafening roar as the air around her seemed to shatter and reform, like the fabric of reality itself was unraveling. She clung to the console, her mind racing with fear and determination. She couldn't fail, not now. Then, silence. Eloa opened her eyes cautiously, expecting chaos, but instead found herself suspended in a void of shimmering light. The chamber and her companions were gone, replaced by a swirling expanse of colors that pulsed in rhythm with her heartbeat. The medallion around her neck floated weightlessly, its glow synchronized with the vast network of glyphs that surrounded her. A voice, softer now, echoed through the void. Dimensional recalibration complete. Connection stabilized. Welcome, Vorian Air. Eloa's breath caught in her throat. Air. What does that mean? The light shifted, forming into a figure, a translucent, towering silhouette that resembled her mother. The figure's voice was calm and familiar, yet imbued with an otherworldly resonance. You carry the legacy of the Vorian lineage, a people who once bridged worlds and dimensions in harmony. This network is their greatest creation, a means to unite the scattered threads of existence. Tears pricked Eloa's eyes. My mother, was she part of this? The figure inclined its head. Voria was the last guardian of this network. She sought to preserve it from those who would use its power for domination. When the Council of Reislock threatened its existence, she chose exile, entrusting its protection to you. Eloa's chest tightened. Her mother's disappearance, her father's relentless work, it had all been to protect this network. Why didn't she tell me? Why didn't my father tell me everything? They sought to shield you until the time was right, the figure explained. You are the key, Eloa. The network responds only to those who carry the Vorian lineage. Its power lies dormant until activated by one who is worthy. Eloa's resolve hardened. The council has found me. They're coming for this place. If they take it, they'll destroy everything. The figure's expression remained serene. The network can protect itself, but only with your guidance. The energy required to secure this structure and sever their access will be immense. It will demand a choice. Eloa frowned. What choice? The figure gestured to the swirling lights around them. The network can shield this gateway, sealing it from interference. But to maintain its defenses, it will need a conduit, a source of energy linked directly to its core. As the Vorian heir, you are uniquely suited to fulfill this role. Eloa's heart sank. You're saying I have to stay here? Forever. To safeguard countless worlds, the figure replied gently. The council will not stop. Their reach extends beyond Reislock. If they gain control of the network, they will bring destruction to Earth and beyond. Your presence here would ensure their failure. The weight of the decision pressed down on Eloa. She had fled Ricelock seeking freedom, a chance to live without fear. Now she faced the possibility of sacrificing that freedom for the sake of an entire multiverse. Could she do it? Could she shoulder the burden her parents had carried before her? Her thoughts turned to Andy and Marcus, still in the submersible, unaware of the conversation unfolding in this void. They had risked their lives to help her, driven by curiosity and a sense of duty. Her father's voice echoed in her mind, a memory from her childhood. Courage isn't the absence of fear, Eloa. It's acting despite it. She clenched her fists, her resolve solidifying. If this is what it takes to stop them, I'll do it. I'll protect the network. The figure nodded, a faint smile gracing its ethereal features. You honor your lineage, Eloa. Your decision will ripple across dimensions, safeguarding countless lives. The void began to pulse with energy, the lights converging around Eloa. The medallion on her chest fused with the swirling patterns, anchoring her to the network. A surge of warmth flooded her body, filling her with a sense of purpose and connection. She could feel the vast expanse of the multiverse, the endless threads of existence interwoven through the network. It was overwhelming, yet beautiful. As the energy stabilized, the figure began to fade. You are not alone, Eloa. The network will guide you. Your strength, your brilliance, will ensure its survival. Eloa's voice trembled, but she stood tall. Thank you, for trusting me. The figure disappeared, leaving her alone in the glowing expanse. The network hummed around her, alive and aware. She could feel the Council's breach attempting to penetrate the gateway, their invasive energy clawing at the edges of the structure. With newfound confidence, she extended her will through the console, channeling the network's power. Back in the submersible, Andy and Marcus watched in stunned silence as the structure around them erupted in light. The glyphs on the walls moved like living things, forming a protective barrier that shimmered with otherworldly energy. The shadowy figures of the Council's ships outside faltered, their signals disrupted as the gateway sealed itself off. The submersible shook, and Marcus struggled to keep it stable. What the hell is happening? Andy stared at the glowing console where Eloa had stood moments ago. She's doing it, he whispered, a mixture of awe and heartbreak in his voice. She's saving us. The light intensified one final time, then receded. The submersible was left adrift in the now silent chamber, the gateway's power dormant once more. But Eloa was gone. Andy sank into his seat, his hands trembling. She chose to stay, he murmured. She sacrificed herself to protect us. Marcus placed a steadying hand on his shoulder. She didn't just protect us, kid. She protected everyone. As the submersible ascended back to the surface, Andy's mind raced with thoughts of Eloa. She had left her mark not just on the network but on Earth, ensuring its safety from the Council's grasp. The world would never know her name, but her sacrifice would resonate across dimensions. Beneath the ocean's surface, the gateway pulsed faintly, its energy secure within the network. And at its core, Eloa stood as its guardian, her heart steady with the knowledge that she had fulfilled her father's final wish, and her own destiny.